Okay, our facilitator and instructor for Veg Club is Carol Appenzeller. And Carol thinks more about growing food than most people probably should. And we are indebted to her for that because she has a lot of knowledge that she's going to share with us. She's been growing vegetables for 3 decades. Half of that time has been on Bainbridge Island. Carol has the equivalent of 33 4-by-8-foot plots in her 1/4 acre lot on Bainbridge Island. And it's an inspiration for every vegetable gardener in the Pacific Northwest. Please welcome Carol Appenzeller.
Thank you, John. Well, thanks for arranging everything as always. Hi, everybody. I'm glad you're here. So today we're going to talk about growing for winter food. And first, I would actually like to know a little bit about you. You can give us anything about yourself as a gardener or your garden, just a little something. Just tell us who you are and tell us a little something like, I just moved here, I don't get this weather, or how you grow, what your priority is, or anything like that. So I would start with Herb. Would you be willing to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I've been a summer gardener, although my garden is shaded enough, I don't do tomatoes, but I've got snow peas growing now and beans planted and eating some chard and arugula from the garden, and have beets planted and have put a wire fence around my garden to keep the rabbits out. That's it for me.
On Commodore.
I live on Commodore Lane.
Oh, yeah, not far from me. Thank you very much. That sounds like you have quite a bit. Barbara, will you tell us about yourself? Hi,
Sure.
Barbara.
Yeah. Hi, Carol. Hi, everybody. I live on Old Mill Road, and I've been here about 3 years now. So I'm getting educated in what will grow and the temperatures and what it takes to grow from seed, what it takes to grow from how important it is to grow my transplants out and also save seed. So I am just a gardener that is learning every day. And that's why I'm here, because I want to learn from everybody and be able to share what I learn with others, because I think this is a real important thing we're doing to grow food. Thanks.
And thank you, Barbara. Thank you. Barbara does share. I have been in Barbara's garden many times to learn from her. So thanks for that, Barbara. John, would you share?
I would love to.
Oh, okay. We'll go for John.
The correct John or not? Is there another
Yeah,
John? No, John McInnes.
Yeah. Either one. John McInnes, do you want to share?
Sure.
Thanks. Okay.
Born and raised in Western Washington, lived all my life here. Live in Poulsbo now. I have property up in Sequim and then property here in Poulsbo. Typically, I grow garden up in Sequim and grow tomatoes down here in Poulsbo. I switched it up a little bit this year, and I'm growing everything here in Poulsbo. Neighbors took down a few trees to the south, so I'm gonna try to see if I can get a garden growing here. Grow tomatoes, grow fennel, grow cabbage, red and green, grow, what else do I got going? Snap peas, pole beans, chard, broccoli, cauliflower, kind of everything. A little bit uncertain, not uncertain, but I guess second guessing myself as to why I didn't grow the garden up in Sequim this year. Because up there, we don't have, there are deer around, but the property that I have up there, I'm not bothered by deer, I'm not bothered by rabbits, I'm not bothered by raccoons, I'm not bothered by possum, I'm bothered by all of those here in Poulsbo. So I have a fence that I put up this year, 7 feet to keep the deer out. That had a baby rabbit come through a 2-inch mesh the other day, so I screened it all in chicken wire yesterday. So
oh my goodness.
Anyway, saw the invite here and thought I'd join. Love gardening and look forward to learning.
Oh, thank you so much. I hope you can teach us things too, all of you. How about you, John Fawcett?
Well, my wife is really the gardener. I'm the assistant gardener in this operation. She is the brains of the outfit, so I do leave it to her. I do make requests. We're gonna try to grow watermelon this year. That's one of my requests. But she always picks great stuff, and we have lots of things grown. Oh, we might do corn this year as well because we have a place to plant it. Other than
Nice.
that, it's the traditional, we grow some greens, tomatoes, cucumbers, lots of berries. And we just love being outside, getting our hands dirty and hanging out there with the dogs and just digging in the dirt.
Yay. Thank you. That's great. Helps us all remember why we like it. Thank you so much. How about Cindy?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can, Cindy.
Okay. I've been on the island for 6 years, 5 of them gardening, but I just moved to the pea patch next to the church in Winslow.
Mhm.
And so I've just started with that place, and this wasn't such a good year to start, I think. The
Oh,
seeds
yeah.
took a long, long time to come up. And I've got a lot of greens planted, squash, beans, some 3 or 4 different kinds of squash. But one of the things I'd like to know is a lot about how to keep it going over the winter, like if you can keep the greens going over the winter. And
Mhm.
so I'm interested in knowing how to do that.
I think you've come to the right place.
Good.
I hope that's true. Thank you so much. How about you, Kathy? Is Kathy still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I've been doing some limited gardening for several years and not very successful. I don't have a whole lot of sunlight here, so I'm sort of limited to what I can do. But I've got some lettuce and a few tomatoes that are getting sort of diseased already with all the rain. And
Oh, I saw that.
yeah,
Yeah.
what else?
Sorry
I don't
about
know. But I do what I can. But I'm always interested in
Yes,
other
you do what you
things.
can. And you're always learning.
Yep.
Unfortunately, sometimes the lessons are kind of mean. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm glad you're here. How about Kate? Kate, would you like to go? Okay. Kate will be back, I bet. How about Anne? It just says Anne, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure. A-N-N-E. Is that you,
It's me.
Anne?
Yep.
Okay.
Uh,
Hi.
I am I'm on here to learn. I've planted things for years now and never been very successful. Not really had a lot of time in the past to kind of figure things out, and now I've got a little more time, so been having fun this spring, even though it's pretty cold. Yep.
Cool. Well, I know it can be heartbreaking when the warm weather stuff doesn't go, but something always goes well. If the tomatoes hate it, the lettuce loves it.
Yeah, this is
So,
the first
yeah.
time I've had a banner crop of greens, and it's been great. And also I loved your input on the remesh with the greenhouses. I did experiment with that, and it was very, very successful.
Yay, I'm glad. I'm very glad. That's terrific. And we have another John on here. If your name is John and you haven't spoken, will you talk to us?
Hand raised.
Oh,
I think that might be my second computer.
oh, that's your second computer. Okay.
I could talk again if you wanted.
Oh, love it. That'd be nice. I saw Tammy Meter for a sec, but is she here? Do you see her? Tammy, are you on here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Tammy. Will you tell us a tiny bit about yourself?
Oh, yeah, okay. I've
as
been
a
on,
gardener or, you know?
we've been
just
on the island for about 25 years and we have a really nice, large place. But, we kind of struggle about when to plant our winter veggies, when
Mhm.
and how to amend them. And also thinking this year with La Nina in the fix, I mean, can we plant winter veggies early? Or what should we be planting now?
Right. Good question. Yeah, and some of it you do plant now. Right. And with with climate changing and weather being different every year, you do have to kind of adapt, and it's a bit of a gamble, but I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
So yeah, so some I know Tammy, I know some of Tammy's experience, and I know some of Barbara's experience. So if you don't mind, since it's called Veg Club, I will probably ask you questions like, when do you usually plant this? And you get to say, I don't know, or I do it now and it never works, or whatever. But that would be helpful. Yeah. I think it's Anne Greiser. Are you on here still?
That's me.
One person.
Yeah, that's the Ann.
Oh, that's you. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I saw it too. Okay. Great. Did I miss anybody? It's not personal if I did. Okay. All right. You know what? I think I'm going to change my share and see if I can get away with this. Just a sec. See what shows up. Nope. Okay. Okay, that's what I want. Okay, so we're going to talk about winter veg growing, and I'm going to give you all these dates. And I've heard people in past classes say, I don't remember when, I always forget, I remember too late. Well, some of the things that I'm telling you, you might want to grow next year, and there is nothing wrong with putting a 2023 planting date on an electronic calendar or a paper calendar. It's not unsophisticated or whatever. It's not only for your dental appointments and important business meetings. I put stuff, I'll get some harebrained idea that I want to try growing peanuts. And I don't have 9 months before I can grow peanuts or something. So I just put it on the calendar just as a little reminder. And then you don't have to do it later, but you can. And another thing that I wanted to say before we start is you don't have to grow a lot of each crop that you see here, because you're learning. I think, this is my position, you might want to grow a lot, but if you don't have much room, you can grow a little bit and then you will be gaining experience and knowledge about that crop. And that's really what I care about, is us knowing more. And so this is what I think we're going to go through. I know we're going to go through in the class today. Why grow it? It seems like a one-word answer, but it is a long answer, I think. What you can grow, how are you going to fit it into your garden, because you've got stuff in there already, when to plant it and when to harvest, when to plant it with specific planting calendars that you'll get on the resource page, how to protect it over the winter. And then I'm throwing in resources for drip irrigation, because some people took an irrigation class recently, and other people were asking about it. So I just would put those in. And then we have really, really different events coming up. So I'm excited about those. So I want to tell you about those too. That right there is my front yard, and every lump is food. So a lot of those lumps are protected, but some of them are not very protected. So they're protected in different ways. And I'd like to talk about what we can grow and in the different seasons, and then how to protect it. So first, why do we want to do this? Well, I think you already know. A lot of you are here because you know that you have this space, and why would you only eat out of it half the year? It's also super satisfying. I wrote this list when I was thinking about, sometimes we get brand new gardeners who just are coming to every session, and they might not know at all why they want to eat food in the middle of winter, but soup makes you feel like a squirrel who prepared properly when you eat in the middle of the winter from your own garden, I think. It's virtuous in so many ways. And we end up eating more veg because I look at the fridge, I think, what's for dinner? And I never think, oh, all I've got is this bag of frozen corn, because I have all this food to eat. And it's like a fridge, but the food never rots because it's still connected to its roots. And so it is sort of in suspended animation for you. And it's definitely an emergency preparedness skill. In fact, this series was initiated by Bainbridge Prepares for food resiliency in emergencies, not because if an earthquake hits, we're all going to run outside and plant carrots, because that doesn't help us. But what helps any community is not just relying on the trucks that bring you food, but to have food stored in various ways in a decentralized way. So the more we do this, the more I teach you, you teach me, we go elsewhere and teach other people, the more we get our food decentralized, and not just in emergency buckets of dehydrated food, which a lot of us have, and that's great, but also fresh food that we know how to grow. Yeah, and here's a trivia point. How many days, well, this is just for Bainbridge Island, but how many days of food does Bainbridge have on it? And Bainbridge is a typical town. Say the bridge goes down and the ferries are commandeered in an emergency. How many days of food do we have in all the restaurants and all the grocery stores and all the trucks who happen to be delivering that day? So get a mental idea. And the answer, I think, John, I think you know this, it's 2, right? We've got 2 days of food.
I have
So
no idea
that-
what the answer is, so I'll go with
Okay,
I'll
I've
defer
been
to your
told
judgment.
I've been told it's 2 days. That's why the city is saying store it now and learn it now. I don't mean to bum everybody out, but it's really great to have all this food. It's been great in COVID as well to have food in the garden. No watering in the winter and early spring, so you can just leave and you don't have to have a irrigation set up. And your ground space does open up for winter veg. In the middle of summer, some of your spring crops come out. And not only do you get more space, but you get more mental space, because you're not fighting the, oh no, I should have done that in January. I need to turn the beds over for spring. I'm fighting the weeds. I'm mowing the lawn. A lot of that just goes into a lull in late summer. And so you have more time, a little bit of time to do a little project. So maybe you want to expand. Also, you see where you might want to grow. Like, I put this in the wrong place, so maybe I'm going to put a bed over there. And also, it just makes you a better gardener. So there are several ways, several times to grow stuff, and that results in eating at different times of year. And there are also different kind of things that we can grow, different ways to grow. So these things in this picture are all things that we would grow earlier in the year, earlier than now. So these are available, but these end up being foods that we eat over winter. So if you're interested in these are, some of these are more for more experienced gardeners. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. It's just a lot of times people say, well, I don't want to grow my dried beans and my dried corn for cornmeal, because I'm still learning about the rest of gardening. But if any of these interest you, they are definitely things that you can grow. There are some really great storage onions that last a super long time. There are very early dried beans that you can grow. This is a kind of corn that was bred for the Northwest that makes great cornbread, and it's gorgeous. It's very fun to do. This one over here is sweetmeat. I bet a lot of gardeners know about this. This is Oregon Homestead variety bred by Carol Deppy. So sweetmeat is a squash that you can grow. It's Northwest adapted. It's like an heirloom. But most of these are things that you would have planted earlier. So definitely, this is something to keep in mind for winter food, that there are plants that you can plant that store for a really long time. I think the sweet meat, it takes up a lot of space, but it's the best squash I've ever tasted. And I often, when I go to harvest the new sweet meat, I often have a sweet meat left from the previous year. It lasts that long. And also, does everybody know we plant garlic in the fall? So this actually is coming up. We plant garlic in the fall here, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So instead of just focusing on these storage crops, I'm going to talk about crops that you can plant in the near future and then harvest. And it sounds like we have a lot of experience in this group already. So I'm going to go just quickly into some fall harvest stuff. And please disagree and put, raise your hand or just call out. It's not that big a group. To say that you disagree with this planting date or something. Tammy, is that you, Tammy, who wrote How Do We Store the Storage Veggies?
Yeah, I was, sorry.
We're going to do how to store in the September class.
Awesome, thank
So
you.
were you here just for storage, or were you here for growing?
I'm here for
mostly
it all.
growing.
Okay. I'll go for it all.
Okay, awesome. Okay, yeah, we're going to talk about that. And anybody who has tips, bring them when you come. So anyway, we're going to do a tiny bit on fall, and I'm going to just zoom through the fall stuff because there's a ton of stuff you can grow in fall, and I have planting calendars for you that will tell you about that. But I'm going to hit a few highlights, and then I'll do a few highlights for winter food and also for spring food. So here we go. For fall harvest, everybody knows about arugula, except we might have a couple of new gardeners who don't know that there are two kinds of arugula. They're not even that closely related. They're different genuses. They taste similar, so we call them arugula. So that's the one you want to do for fall. It's often called salad arugula. And you can direct seed it. It sprouts fast, grows fast, and bolts fast. But something you can do to reduce its likelihood of bolting is give it space. It's super tempting to plant arugula really tightly, like 1 inch apart, 2 inches apart, even 4 inches apart, it can still bolt. So the reason it bolts is it gets stressed out. It runs out of water or it runs out of food. So what you can do is go ahead and sprinkle them in every 2 inches or 4 inches or whatever, but then pull them so that the plants are 6 inches apart, and make sure, I'm sorry, I should have said before you plant them, put a balanced organic fertilizer in there. Or if you have fertilized with a balanced organic fertilizer recently, you can just put a little nitrogen fertilizer in there. And organic nitrogen sources are blood meal if you do animals, let's see, cottonseed meal, soy meal, fish emulsion, fish meal. So those will give food for the arugula and keep the moisture even. Because I have plants of arugula that are a foot tall and a foot wide or more than a foot wide, and they produce without bolting because they have space. When I give them less space, then they bolt more easily. Sorry. So this other one we're going to talk about later, but it's quite a different growth habit and a different plant. Anybody want to do fall peas? The instruction, the calendars recommend late June to mid-July. You can see these two planting dates that I did a couple of years ago. When I planted late June, I harvested everything by early September. So they were kind of like a late summer pea. And when I planted July 15th, I harvested everything within September, the month of September. And you can try pushing it later than that if you want to and plant later. But what happens is we get puny plants and they never set peas. Sometimes if we plant too late, because they need that sun in order to want to flower. And you can see there are a lot of peas on those plants. Those are only 3 foot tall plants. So if you do want to do fall peas, you want something quick maturing, like 60 days, which are generally short plants. So they'll say 2.5 to 4 feet or something. We want them to be enation resistant. Tell you about that in a minute. Powdery mildew resistant. Tell you about that in a minute. And plant them. They'd rather have morning sun and afternoon shade. We know that. Well, some of us know that, and some of us don't know that, huh? So they'd rather have sun from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. than from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. because it's hotter and it's more stressful. And give them shade. if you can, I literally take the window screens off of my house and tip the window screens along the trellis. And if it's still too sunny, I put more window screens on, because I only need to open a couple windows. So, and also keep them evenly watered. So what about this resistance code stuff? I don't know if you've ever wondered when you see those letters. Certainly gardeners who aren't familiar with these would wonder, but even more advanced experienced gardeners don't always have a list for what the heck these letters mean, and they're not always written in the catalog or easy to find. So this is from Johnny's. It's on the resource page already. You're going to get the resource page later, and you can just type in eNation or something like that. So I can just look for it on this list. And so we see PEMV. If I put eNation in, and I know I need an eNation resistant P, then I'm going to see these letters, and I need a powdery mildew. So I'm going to see those letters. But where am I going to see those letters? I'm going to see them, for example, here. Maestro is a recommendation of a variety for a shelling pea that does well, and that is both powdery mildew and eNation resistant. So here they are. And those letters mean that it's resistant to those diseases. And this link is also on the resource page. And Cascadia is another one. It's a snap pea where you eat the whole pod. And that's another good one. You can do bush beans. I bet maybe we know that. You can do them until late July. These are not the tall climbers. They are basically, you're almost looking at the whole plant here. There are a few leaves above this plant, and then they just set a lot of beans all at once. Some people like to freeze beans for winter, and so this would be one you could plant. So not a tall climber. Those need to be planted earlier, but you can often get away with a July planting. Now, it's cool, right? It's cooler. So if we continue with cool weather, and Tammy was asking, should we plant earlier? Yeah, you might try it. Part of this is just us learning. So for the arugula, for example, if I have a 3-week window in which to plant it, I might try planting some 1 week too early, and then in the middle, and then at the end of that. So I can see what works, because I'm trying to grow my knowledge, increase my knowledge, not just, get a crop this year. And of course, you can do brassicas too. June 15th for broccoli that you want to eat in the fall is a good date. They want that afternoon shade and morning sun. And Bellstar is a hybrid, but if you're just starting on brassicas and trying to grow broccolis, it's very reliable, I think. Does anybody have a fall broccoli recommendation? Like a kind? Does anybody have anything that you'd like to say so far? Like contradiction, that's wrong, Carol, something like that? Okay. Okay, here we're keeping going on then. Does anybody have a question?
Yeah, no, I'm
Oh.
super excited because we just bought some starts of broccoli and cauliflower, and your June 15th date seems to work out just right.
Yeah, and those were started probably a few weeks ago, but you're just going to get them earlier, and they'll be great.
So
yeah.
you were saying do seed by June
Yeah.
15th, or?
Yeah, these are seeding dates. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's fine. I do lots of summer brassicas usually, and I would just make sure your water's even, and I would even, once they're bigger, like, I don't know, 10 inches tall, then I would use chopped leaves or something and mulch them so they have that even moisture, and make sure that you put fertilizer in when you are planting them. I fertilize the whole bed so their roots can go anywhere. So cool. So
Great.
Thank
that's
you.
nice
Thanks.
you have that. Yeah. Okay. Oh, well, here's something about winter harvest. So we're going to look at winter harvest now. And there's this thing called the Persephone period. It's when you have fewer than 10 hours of daylight, plants kind of go dormant. So for us, that's early November to early February. And so what happens is we grow our winter harvested vegetables before that. They're actually growing in summer and fall, and then they pout for a few weeks, and then they start growing again in the spring. And that's sometimes a thing that we like and sometimes a thing that we don't like. So we'll talk about that too. So let's go through some winter harvested stuff. This is just some of the stuff that you can eat out of your garden in the winter, some of which you probably recognize and some that you don't. So I'll hit some of the highlights here. And please tell me if you have a recommendation for a variety or a planting date or anything. So bok choy is quite winter hardy. It needs cover, it needs protection, but it doesn't tank, it doesn't lose its, it's not afraid of having not that much sun. So vitamin green is the one that I usually grow. It's a choy, but there's a seed crop failure in the country this year, which I find dismaying, but also heartening because even the pros have seed failures. And so it's hard to find. You can find it in Canada, but they can't import it. But if you can find some vitamin green, it doesn't bolt easily, and it produced, I did some on August 21st. I looked at my records, and it produced for me from the beginning of November all the way through May. I was still picking it. But other choys work well as well. So prize choy is one that's recommended for winter growing. And we want to start it in cells in the middle of August. Now with these dates, if you have 6 hours, 5 hours of sun, you might go a little bit earlier. I only have 6 or 7 hours. And these dates pretty much, these are ones that work for me. But if you have less sun, you might want to start earlier. And if you've had trouble with bok choys bolting, one trick is that they're very photoperiodic. Photoperiodic means that they're regulated by the hours of light. So if you plant it, say in May, it gets more sunlight more and more and more, and it wants to make flowers. So what you do is wait until way after the solstice, like in August, and then you plant, and it won't bolt. Carrie, what's your question or your thing you want to tell us? Hi, Carrie. You raised your hand. Was that an accident?
No, it was no accident. No. But I have a problem with slugs getting into the bok choy. How do you get
Yes.
slugs?
Well, I make sure that I don't have a lot of places for them to hide around it. Maybe we can all pitch in on this. So I reduce hiding places, and that includes wood and stone and ornamental, like foxglove plants that have a lot of space. So I don't plant them, have a lot of space underneath. I mean, I don't plant them near that. And I use beer traps. Beer traps are they're most effective really super early in the spring, late winter, early spring, because there's nothing else to eat and the slugs will flock to them, but I still use them now. I don't mulch the baby sprouts, the little starts of bok choy, because mulch just is an invitation. It's like a highway for them to get there. Once the plants are big, I'll mulch them. And I water in the morning and let the soil surface dry out. Is anybody else ready with some more advice for Carrie? Those are all things that work for me, Carrie. And it's harder in this spring
Carol?
because nothing ever dries out. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Was that somebody else wanting to give some hints, some tips? Okay. Okay. Escarole, this is another winter one. This is super winter hardy, and it's a great lettuce substitute because for me, if I have winter lettuce and I'm protecting it so it doesn't freeze, the slugs love that. So it's a complete slug race between me and the slugs to get to the lettuce. But escarole, they don't eat that much. They might be under it. They might be one or two in it, but they're not eating it. It's slightly more, it's slightly chewier than lettuce, just a little bit. You've probably eaten it in a salad and not even known that it wasn't lettuce. It's slightly more bitter just if you eat it raw, but if you dress it, sour and bitter are chemical opposites. One's a base and one is an acid, and they don't just cover each other up, they actually destroy each other and they make other interesting flavors. So I quite like it. Natasha and Diva are recommended, are things that I've grown, the ones that I've grown that have been successful. Natasha looks really upright in this picture, but it's not. It grows just like Diva. So it actually has leaves that are down against the soil. So when I'm harvesting, I'll often take off the leaves that hit the soil because they get a little bit more rotty. And then I take off, well, I'll back up a minute. I started on August 1st in cells, and then I plant it out at the end of August, and I give it rain protection because it does rot just a little bit. And now I'm going to tell you about the leaves. So I take off those on the bottom, just, if they're not looking good. And then I go to each plant, and for my family, I plant a dozen plants because there are 3 of us. And I take off maybe 1 row from each plant because I want to eat each plant in all winter, like 1 level in. I just want to keep eating in from the edges of the plants. You can imagine that, like you would do with lettuces maybe. And that feeds us until March. And then in March, the outer leaves, the very outer leaves, start to get a little bit tougher. I can hardly tell the difference, but it just seems like they're ready to come off. So I strip those off so that I just have, we've eaten it, and we've eaten it, and we've eaten it, right? And then it keeps growing leaves in, and then I strip off the outer leaves in March, and I have maybe a 5-inch center, and it looks like a healthy little lettuce. And I side dress them again with a little bit of high nitrogen fertilizer, make sure that the soil's moist, and they grow back. So I have eaten them all winter down to this 4 to 5-inch nub, and then I side dress them and they make an enormous head again. And this is in April and May, and then they'll bolt in May. But that gives you a huge amount of food, and especially in a time when people are not, when gardens are not producing a whole lot in that early spring. Also giant winter spinach. So look how big this spinach leaf is, and they get bigger than that. So you sow these, Tammy wants dates, sow them mid-August, and then you can, it's set, the recommendations always say for a fall harvest and again in early spring. I find that it goes pretty late in the fall, and then they'll probably slow down for the Persephone period, and they will reproduce in the spring. They'll produce more leaves, but it doesn't feel like it's just, fall and early spring. It just feels like it's quite long. They make huge leaves, and they have an antifreeze system that plants like to put sugar into their leaves to make it so they don't freeze. And so these are very sweet, like freakishly sweet, but they're delicious. And I have watched one of them that I neglected to cover, get covered up completely in snow. And I thought, well, that's soup. That's going to be a mush when it thaws. And it thawed, and it looked about like the stuff in the picture. It was so tough. It's a little tricky to get spinach to germinate in the heat of the summer. And I know you had this happen, Carrie. So it's thermally dormant above 70. Some of them will go to like almost up to 75, but the winter spinaches don't like being above 70. So I put them in cells, which are those little tiny pots, and I seed pretty heavily. So maybe 3 to a cell, or 2 or 3. And I try to keep them in my coolest place, so there are times when I have a flat of spinach on my tile floor of my kitchen. And I just try to get those to sprout. So, and it works. And these are 2 varieties, Giant Winter and Monstro de Virofly. This is Baker Creek rare seeds, and they're both open pollinated, which means you can save the seed. And then there's corn salad. It's kind of the opposite. It's really tiny. This is about 2.5 inches tall, probably. So if you plant it, you don't have to crowd them, but you should probably plant quite a bit of them. Sorry. They have a really mild flavor, but they're super cold hardy. Elliot Coleman says they're one of the few plants that you can harvest when they're crisp from frost, basically. And I have done that. I picked one and I thought, well, that is crunchy. So that is, you know, when I felt it, it was crispy. So I put it in my mouth and it was fine. So they're very cold hardy. They're very mild. So I don't actually grow them very much anymore because I want a more robust flavor, but they are interesting. And if it says special summer type, don't grow that one, grow the winter type. I have kale in here because I met 2 people in the past couple of weeks who grow in the Pacific Northwest, and they didn't know you could overwinter kale, and they didn't know about kale sprouts in the springtime. So kale is very robust and you can keep it all winter. You can either plant in the summer, late summer, to have kale, new kale for the fall, or you can have just the ones I've been growing, you've been growing, started in April, or I usually start mine pretty late, like May, because I do that because I want a bigger plant. I want it to grow in the spring and the summer so that I have a big, robust plant going into the winter. Mine are sometimes so tall that I have to stake them. I would rather have that than a plant that just has like 10 leaves on it, because I want to have more food in a smaller footprint. John, what's up? John Fawcett.
We've overwintered our kale for years. And one of the things that I discovered a couple of years ago is when we had a couple of really big frosts, it looks like it kills the kale. It lays flat on the ground. It's just, I mean, it's basically on its back with its feet up in the airs. And then as soon as it gets above freezing, it comes back awake and it stands back up and it grows again. It's
Isn't that weird?
I've seen it 2 winters in a row. It's the most remarkable thing I've ever seen.
Isn't that crazy? My botany prof said they pull water out of their cells because water expands when it freezes. So they dehydrate themselves so that if it expands, then it doesn't pop the cells. I mean, not specific to kale, but yeah, it can look terrible. So just wait. That's a good thing. Fran, tell us, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I want to ask about this matter of them blooming, because like right now, I've got some kale that are about to bloom. And do I just let them bloom, or what's the deal on bloom?
Just out of curiosity, are these kale you planted this spring or did you plant them last year?
Yeah, one that's about to bloom, I planted this spring. I planted early in March, early March.
Okay. You can eat the blooms, and I'll talk about that in a little while. If it's blooming now, then you'll want to replant to have non-blooming plants for your winter food. Because once it's decided to bloom, it's really hard to convince it to do leaves.
I see. So, but isn't this too early to replant for winter?
I don't think so, because I want a big kale plant going into winter. I want it to have lots of leaves on it going into winter. But when you look at the planting calendars that I give you, it may say, you know, plant later. So that's your choice whether you want to do it sooner or later. I wouldn't go too late. Like if it says you can plant during this 3-month period and it says as late as September 1st, you're probably not going to get a very big plant if you plant on September 1st.
So plant in August?
Yeah, you can plant in August. I'll check the calendar. We can check the calendar together today and see, because I don't plant when they tell you to. Herb, what do you have to tell us?
My chard usually overwinters. I just leave the chard at the end of the growing season, and usually this winter it didn't do so well, but often it'll overwinter and pop up in the spring. So I get chard in the spring before I get anything else growing.
Isn't that great? Yeah, leaving these things and letting them continue in the spring is really great. Yeah, it's always, I think it's worth leaving things just to see. Chard, it's not red chard, is it? You know, it doesn't have red stems. I think you're muted. You're muted, Herb.
Some are white, some are yellow, some are red. It's
Okay,
territorials,
bright lights.
rainbow chard.
Yes, okay. I read there is a strain of rainbow chard that was being bred just by people, folks, and it's probably on the market now that is even more cold resistant. Yeah, chard will often freeze down, right, and then come back. So you do lose the leaves, and it looks gross, right? They call it melting.
But in the spring, it comes back.
Yeah, yeah, from that massive root.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really great. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of plants will do that. We have two more. Barbara, what are you telling us?
Yes, hi. I wanted to just share too with Fran about the blooming kale or any of the brassicas that bloom. I love to leave them and let them bloom because it attracts all the pollinators. It forms
Right.
seed, and then I can harvest the seed that is actually adapted to my bioregion right here. And then I can use that seed to replant. I don't need to go buy seed or order seed, and it's very vital. So I love to feed the pollinators. Number one, those bumblebees, they just are all over the brassicas when they bloom. And number two, I get free seed. And so it's wonderful. And it's beautiful in the garden.
That's amazing.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's really great. And then the native bees like brassicas, and the native wasps that are predatory, right? Yeah. Somebody else has their hand up, I guess. Is that it? Okay. Well, what else? Beets, of course you can overwinter beets. They're great at overwintering. So I have done it as late as July 18th, but it depends on your sun. So first week of July is a good bet. Does anybody plant their beets a lot later than this, or? Nope. Well, I just recommend beets. They need a little protection, but I will show you how to protect them. And parsnips also. Parsnip, we need new parsnip seed every year. You can save your parsnip seed. Some people do that. But if you do that, then you need to use that the next year to get a good germination rate. Parsnip seed doesn't tend to keep for very long, weirdly. But sometimes some people just, seed a lot more heavily if they use old seed. You can direct seed it now. You can do it earlier than now, and you'll get bigger roots. But I think if you do it now, you can still get good sized roots, usable sized roots. But they are very slow to germinate. So you have to make it your job to go out there on a sunny day, maybe twice a day, to keep those moist. But they're easy after that. If you can just get the darn things out of the ground, up their leaves out of the ground, then they're easy to grow, and you just harvest them as needed. But with all root crops, beets and carrots and parsnips, they're going to bolt in early February. So I'd keep an eye on it, because that's the end of the Persephone period. Things start growing again. And for a root crop like this, what they're intent on doing now is growing seeds. So you can certainly let some of them go to seed and save them, as Barbara says, and let the bees benefit. But if you want to eat them, you're going to need to pull those, because everything that's going into that new growth is coming out. It's the nutrition coming out of the parsnip itself. And you can make parsnip chips if you're wondering what to do with them. Carrots, same thing. July 1 is my date. I think of 4th of July actually is when I do it. And you have to do the same thing of keeping them moist. I put window screens over the top to keep them from drying out while they're germinating. And that's because when I put cardboard down, sometimes 25% of them have germinated, and I want to keep the other ones moist. So if I leave the cardboard there, little critters like roly-polies and stuff come in and eat the new ones. So I want to have some light to discourage the insects. So I put the screens on just to reduce drying. The bottom picture is rust fly, and I talk about that in the April class. So what we use is to discourage this rust fly is very early on in the growing of the carrots, we put on a really thin row cover, and thin because it's we're growing them in July. We don't want something that's going to be a really cozy blanket. So see, you can see right through this. It looks like Kleenex. This is a row cover. It's a spun poly fabric. And it lets water through, so you can water right through it, and it lets 90% of the light through. So, but it keeps the flies out. You have to bury the edges, and you have to leave a lot of room in the fabric. So you're putting it on maybe 2-inch tall carrots, right? Carrot tops, but you have to think and leave enough for those carrots to get maybe 18 inches tall. If you want a really detailed droning on about how to cover your carrots and when to thin them and stuff like that, you can go to the April class and click through. We have recordings of these classes. Click through until you see a carrot screen. That's carrot rust fly slide is what it is, carrot rust fly. And if you want a winter one, I've overwintered a lot of different carrots and they seem fine, but Napoli is a really good one. It's bred for winter harvest, overwintering. But I will have more recommendations because I'm sending you to a winter catalog, a winter calendar that has specific recommendations as well. Okay, so here's the weird thing is everybody says, oh, it must be really hard to eat in winter from the garden. But then I see them in February, March, and April, and they say, what are you harvesting from the garden? And it's like, I was eating from the garden more easily in December than I can in February, March, and April because of this thing called the Hungry Gap. And the Hungry Gap happens in temperate maritime climates. So us and the UK and some other places in the world where it's not freezing cold through into April, and but it's also not warm enough like the South would be to really get things growing. So in early February, root crops that have a lot of calories that traditionally we relied on, and we didn't have refrigeration and we didn't have greenhouses, those things would start to sprout. Even if they're in storage, even if they're in the dark in your root cellar, they figure it out and they start sprouting. So their quality goes down and some of them rot. And other things that don't sprout, like apples, their temperature goes up just enough so they start to spoil and oxidize as well. So we run out of the stored foods, but we also, it's been too cold because it's been too cold in the winter for us to plant enough and get things growing enough to have things actually coming out of the garden. So it's called the Hungry Gap, and I've read that historically Lent is related to this. So spring fasting has to do with this Hungry Gap. So, but look what you can eat in the Hungry Gap. Tammy Meter, these are your hands. So I'm gonna ask you about this. So that ascarole I talked about, that you eat it all winter and then you harvest it down to the 5-inch and then 5-inch size, and then it grows back. That's great. Kale rob is great. That's why we leave our kale in. But I'd like to say Brussels sprout rob, if you harvest all the Brussels sprouts on your Brussels sprout plant and just leave it there, it produces a really yummy rob. I've cut off cabbages and left it, and it's going to make lots of little sprouts. And those are delicious too. So I'm definitely an advocate of leaving those things and trying to eat them later. We can do some perennials like this. Like I'll talk about perennials in a minute. Let's go down here. Oh, there's my kale rob. If you want late kale rob, there's one that supposedly produces later, like in May. If you just can't get enough kale rob and you want some kale that produces kale rob not in April, but in May, Russian Hunger Gap produces then. I don't have any problem with it, so I haven't used it, but it's an option. Oh yeah, and Sylvetta arugula. So this is the arugula that we didn't plant in the fall. You can plant this in the fall or the winter or the very super early spring, like January, February, and it knows when to come up and it'll come up. And eventually I just have mine reseeding. I just save my seed and then I break off, or I let it go to seed, and then I break some off and like gesture with it around the garden. And the bees are happy and I'm happy. So it comes up later. That's a great one. And then there are these. You plant these on July 15th very reliably, and you can start them in little pots. And the reason I'm starting them in pots is I want to have them wait until A, they're bigger so that the slugs don't get them. And B, I've got things that are still growing in my garden. So I want those to finish so I have space for these. So I set them out depending on the weather and depending on whether I want to pot them up into slightly bigger pots because I want them to wait longer, somewhere in the second half of August. And I leave them in the ground. So a lot of these brassicas, a lot of brassicas that you plant will grow and then they'll produce a head like in the fall, or I've had brassicas produce a head in December. These are giant plants. If you get them really going and you fertilize them well, they're huge plants. And then they make you think they're giving you nothing in December, January, February, some of them even March and April. You get what you think is nothing. And then Tammy, are you here?
I hear you.
What do you get? And
Oh
when did
my
you get it?
gosh, it's amazing. Overnight, there's just this huge head. Thank you so much, Carol. It's
Oh, you're
true.
welcome.
It's true.
And you did Prestige Collie, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you did the Collie, so it was a Prestige, yeah. And these are open pollinated too.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
so
It's amazing.
was it hard to keep the Collie going? Sometimes Collie is picky, like if you dry it, let it dry out, or it doesn't have enough fertilizer or stuff.
No,
Anything.
no. Our only problem was leaving it too long and it got
Uh-huh.
a frost and it froze on top and then it was no good.
Yes.
That was a different, yeah, that was a different batch, but yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. The plants themselves, the leaves, I don't protect. But if I know it's going below freezing, I go and look, and any head that's on there, I take the towels that I use to, like, dry off the dog or the boat, the kayak or whatever, and I just take the folded up towel and throw it over the top, or a bowl from the kitchen or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the heads themselves can be damaged. But
Thank you.
Prestige produces in May for me most of the time. I got all of it in May this time. Purple Cape produces in, depends on the year, late February, early April, March rather, late February, early March. And Purple Sprouting is also February, March. If you want to just start with this, I mean, if you want, let's say, I want to encourage anybody to do any of these, but Purple Sprouting might be the simplest. So it's weird to plant in July for the following spring, but we do have to set ourselves up for filling up the hunger gap. Purple Sprouting, you can see that this is actually a collection of small heads. So they come up all over the plant. They don't have a concentrated head, and you can pull them off or snap them off and use them, and they'll come back. And then you snap those off and they'll come back. And every time you do it, they come back smaller, but you can get a lot of food from the Purple Sprouting. And these actually produce, since the heads are really big, I would say they produce quite a lot of food per plant as well, but they don't come back. Once you cut it off, then that's it for the ones with the main heads. But I take the leaves off and I feed them to my neighbor's chickens, and it gives the chickens greens in a time when they wouldn't have a lot of greens. And then she gives me eggs, and they're all the better for it. So I feel like that's not a huge waste. And what else? Oh, Purple Cape, there was a seed crop failure this year. So you may not be able to get Purple Cape this year. You can look around. There are Etsy people who save the seed, so you could try that. I can't say that, it's certified disease-free or anything, but excuse me, but you could try it. Gary, what do you say?
I have to say that I wanted to know what open pollinated means.
Oh, thank you so much. Open pollinated means that if you save the seed, you will get the same kind of plant that you took the seed from, because it's a purebred. that's distinct from a hybrid, which has two parents who are somewhat different from each other, and they have qualities that the breeders want to put together. They want the qualities of both, so they cross those. And what happens is when you try then to breed those on, you might get the qualities of one or the qualities of the other, but you won't necessarily get that same plant that you had at the beginning. And a lot of people like open pollinated because they can save seed, and then they don't have to buy it from, just on principle. They like the idea of seed saving because then it's ours, right?
Yeah.
Barbara, do you have anything to add? Oh, sorry.
I had a question about that. Sorry for butting in. Oh, it's
No.
Tammy.
Hi, Tammy, thanks.
Hi, question. So open pollinated, how do you know, like if your zucchini is open pollinated, it's not cross pollinating with a pumpkin or another squash nearby? And
You don't. You don't. So that's really great. So do you already know the answer to that, or is that?
no, I don't.
Okay. You don't
I
know,
get,
and people save sweet meat seeds. I've done this, and I didn't isolate the flower. So I'll tell you what that means in a minute. But they say I saved the seed, and I had no pumpkins of the kind that would cross pollinate with it. But somebody in my neighborhood did because I got some terrible fruit out of it. But what you can do is hand pollinate. So I'm going to go to that sweet meat flower. And as soon as it opens, before anybody gets to it, I'm going to take a male flower and strip off the petals and eat them because they're delicious. And then I'm going to put that male pollen on that female plant, and then I'm going to close it. Barbara, do you have any advice about that?
I don't.
Okay. Okay. Did that answer your question?
I think so.
Some plants love to cross-pollinate. Radishes love to cross-pollinate. So that's true. But some people just like open pollinated as on the principle of the thing as well. They're not going to save the seed, but they like that it's open pollinated.
Okay. Okay. So not everything cross pollinates.
No, not everything cross-pollinates. Yeah, I'm not an expert on that, but there are some things that don't cross-pollinate very much. Like tomatoes, right, Barbara?
Right. Yeah, tomatoes, and I don't have that problem with my peppers either.
We've seen a squash cross-pollinate.
Yeah, squashes are different.
Yeah, they're
sure.
radishes are so promiscuous. They say they like to cross-pollinate so much that you have to isolate the seed crops, like for seed companies by miles. And yeah, my friend grew pumpkini one year.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
unfortunate.
we got a weird thing one year.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Who else? Carrie, what's up? Carrie, is your hand up on purpose? Often my hand is up and it's not on purpose. Okay, I'll go on. Before we do perennials, shall we have a break, John? Let's have a little break. Let's have a 5-minute break.
I'll set the alarm for 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll see everybody at 8:15. Bye-bye. Are we back?
Hold
I
30
don't know if
seconds.
John's back. Oh,
Hold
okay,
30
sorry.
seconds.
Yeah. Hi, Maridel.
Hi, sorry, I'm so late.
Fine. We're glad you're here.
Got here.
And there's always the video if you want to get the
I'll pick
skinny.
it up from cauliflower when I get.
All right. Okay, we ready? John asked, do we have carrot fly here? Yes, we do. Some gardeners sometimes get away with not getting carrot fly if they plant early in the spring, or if, I think, Tammy, didn't you say you don't get carrot fly? And Brian said you don't get carrot fly if you plant over winter, but I think that was in overwintered teeny tiny carrots, right?
I know that we've not gotten it in this spring. No, in the late, I usually don't. I had a friend that told me don't plant them in the spring because of the carrot fly. So I only plant the carrots later and I've never gotten the fly.
Do you plant them in the fall? Like when do you start them?
More like July.
Yeah, I do them in July too. And I do get carrot rust fly in July. Not terrible, but it kind of depends on where you are, I guess.
Oh, is carrot and rust fly the same thing?
Rust fly and carrot rust fly are the same thing.
Okay.
Oh, carrot fly. I don't know. I don't know other carrot. I don't know of other carrot flies if you've heard that from somebody else. But if you heard me say carrot fly or carrot rust fly, then they are the same thing.
And my
Okay.
apologies. I did say carrot fly.
So I said I didn't get much in the winter. Sometimes I don't get much, but sometimes I get a lot. And I looked up the population, like when the population peaks, and it's quite late. It's like October, November. So if you're gonna get them, you can still have them quite late in the year.
Yeah, I did try one year a variety, and I don't recall now because it's probably been about 5-6 years, out of the UK that was carrot fly resistant, and it seemed to do
Yeah.
fairly well. But
Yeah,
I
was it
hadn't
called
tried that again.
Resistifly? Sorry. Yeah, interesting. That'd be interesting if you can get it too. There's
Yeah.
one called Resistifly. Was that it?
That sounds familiar, but it's been a while. And I don't remember how they taste and that type of thing, but and then I kind of quit growing them, but I want to start growing carrots again, and I want to do the the wintering over like we're talking about here. And that's where the carrot fly is, again, my lay term, was a problem, because every time I tried to winter over, I would end up with carrot fly or damaged carrots.
Yeah. So if you look back in the March class, there's a carrot rust fly section, and it will tell you what to do. I tell people that you can let them get 2 inches tall before you put the remay on, the fabric, the row cover that I was talking about. But if it's bad and you want to really not have any, I would put it on maybe right after you seed the bed, and then you're going to have to pull it off to weed and thin and put it right back on, because you know how you can smell carrots when you're weeding? So can the flies. And that's how they know. So they'll come. So also you can see, sometimes you'll see flies that are trapped in the cover. But the great thing is they're not expecting you. They're sitting upside down on the row cover on the inside, and they're not expecting you. So you just go pinch, and you can kill off any that are inside.
Okay.
So I found it very successful. So you want the March class. I think I also did it in the, I did it in the March class, but that was spontaneous. The April class is the one where you're going to see an actual slide for it.
Okay, well, this is my first time here. I will go do some research then. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a list on the resource page. Hi, Barbara, what's up?
Yeah, I have a question about the carrot fly. Are there any natural predators that can be attracted for the carrot fly, either as a predatory wasp or whatever, or are there any kind of traps that you can use, pheromone traps that would be good for the carrot fly?
I haven't seen any pheromone traps recommended, but that'd be really interesting to know about. I have not seen anything for rust fly. I'm writing that down. Maybe you'll find something and you'll let me know.
Yeah, I'll
Or-
look, but
Mhm.
I thought maybe there might also be some natural predators that would be,
Yeah, if the usually natural predators are for larvae, right? And
right.
so they would need to be a predator that can trap the larvae in the soil because that's where the rust fly lays its eggs. And then it lays it right next to the root. And then the rust fly larva comes out of the egg and crawls right over and gets in the root. So maybe I don't know, it would be too big for a nematode, I think.
Yeah.
But that's
Or-
interesting. Maybe a fungus or something could get it.
Or, yeah, a fungus, probably. Yeah, that
That's
sounds.
an interesting question. Yeah. There's a company called Arbico, ARBICO, if you feel like doing any research.
Yeah.
And they might have something. I would put rust fly in specifically for that.
And what's the site
What
again?
happens? ARBICO.
ARBICO. Okay, thanks, Carol.
Arbico Organics. They're very interesting. They have a lot of predators and stuff. Natural solutions. Yeah, I don't see any more hands. Tell me if you do, John. Okay, well, perennials can fill this gap too, the hunger gap or the hungry gap. Asparagus is a great early spring plant. I grow very little asparagus because I feel I don't have the right sunny spot for it, but I do some. So it wants a super wide, it wants a 3-foot wide bed. It wants it to be dedicated. Asparagus can live for 30 years as a perennial, and they make a mat of roots. And it's really hard to weed once the mat is holding the roots of all the weeds. So we want to keep them very well weeded. And they want maybe a raised bed. Often we do that here because they don't like wet roots in the winter, but they also don't want to be dry in the summer. So you have to kind of manage them. Rhubarb, on the other hand, is it is deer resistant because those leaves are toxic. It is pretty, it's striking, it looks good in an ornamental bed. So I have one in front of my front door. And yeah, it's a lovely perennial plant. Going clockwise, artichokes are bearing now. Mine are just heading up now. And they're a perennial. In fact, they will produce more babies for you, more baby plants. So you can continue to get more and more artichokes. Artichokes look like they would like a really hot baking Mediterranean cliff to me, because they're gray and fuzzy, but they like seaside locations because they get the sun without the heat. So I would not plant them against your hottest wall. They don't really love that. What they like is to be kind of pampered. They want, like all of these perennials want, they want to have nitrogen in the early spring scratched in around them and pretty far out because the roots go as far as the plant leaves go. So put in some nitrogen. Actually, I use an AP fertilizer, like a balanced fertilizer, organic fertilizer scratched into the soil. And then I give them a little bit extra nitrogen, not gobs more, but just a little bit. And they want to have compost on them and they want to have even moisture through their lives. So it looks like a plant to me that would like to be drought, that would enjoy drought, but it's not. But I'm making it sound like you really have to baby it. It just comes up and does its thing. And you only have to put the fertilizer and compost on once a year and make sure it gets a drink. It's not a big deal. This thing here is what asparagus looks like when you buy crowns from the garden center. And we buy them in the spring. And then you can look up how to plant them. This is a perennial cauliflower. It's not really perennial. It means it'll grow for 2 to 3 years, but you have to keep it religiously picked, because if it can make seeds, then it has done what it was born for, right? Is to make those seeds. And so, yeah. So I don't know if you want to pick that religiously or not. Carrie, did you raise your hand?
I did.
Oh, okay.
One more question, sorry, about the rhubarb.
Yeah.
I've had we have some amazing rhubarb. I know nothing about them, but they've got those big seeding spikes and those flower spikes, coming up. And is it okay to leave those, or should I cut 1 or 2 off, or cut them all off? What's good for the plant?
Oh gosh, I don't know. What they say is you should cut them off.
Oh, okay, great.
Feel free to cut them off, but I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know that one. Does anybody else know that one? Do you have to take them off? The plant's going to put a lot of energy into those spikes.
That's what I figured.
So it depends on what you want. Yeah, I wouldn't let the whole spike grow completely tall. And then if you wait that long, it's already put the food into it.
Yeah, okay, I cut them off, so it's a
Maybe
little
Fran knows.
late, but I just didn't know if I did the right.
Fran's raised her hand. She'll
Awesome,
tell us.
thank
Hey,
you.
Fran.
Yeah, I absolutely don't know. My question about rhubarb is, so I've got rhubarb in a common garden in my pea patch, and it lies flat. It lies flat on the ground. It does not look all perky like your picture. How do I make it, stand up like that picture looks?
Has it been in there for a long time?
Yes.
It may need to be divided.
Okay.
So does it make gigantic stems?
No, it makes gigantic leaves.
Okay, but it's not like the most succulent rhubarb you've ever seen?
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So after it's been in for a few years, and the number is 2 to 5 years, is what they usually say. Then you wait for it to go dormant in the winter, and then you sharpen a spade or whatever, and you cut it into, you cut the root and cut it into pieces. Every one that you want to grow needs to have bud on it, if you can see the buds.
Right.
And then you give them away. But maybe, who else raised a hand? Was that you, John?
No, it's me, Herb.
Oh, thank you, Herb.
I had some rhubarb that was growing flat on the ground, and so I just gave it a little bit of balanced fertilizer, and it perked up. So.
Oh, it just was weak from like lack of calcium or something?
Something, yeah.
Ooh, that's an easier answer than mine, right, Fran?
Yes, thank you.
Do his first.
Okay.
I love that everybody's talking. This is so great. Okay, now you might wonder why you'd want to go to the trouble of planting in fall to harvest the following summer. This is another thing you can do. Well, it's because it makes bigger bulbs. So people do that with sweet onions, like Walla Walla sometimes. They'll do it with shallots, but a lot of people around here do this with garlic. So this actually is going to happen for you, say end of October. Tell me if you plant at a different time, but I do mine at the end of October. So you have a bed where something else has come out, and I put a little more compost in it, but if you composted well earlier in the season, you probably don't need to do that. I put some balanced organic fertilizer in there, and then I plant them. You put them 2 to 3 inches deep with the root end down and the pointy end up, and then mulch it with chopped leaves. Something you want to mulch with chopped leaves or straw, something that you don't, that can decompose into the soil. If you do it with wood chips, it's harder for them to get out, but it also means you have to remove those wood chips, and you can't just wait for them to rot in. That said, because wood chips will give you a nitrogen deficiency if you turn them in. That said, in April, you plant them in October, and they're going to grow a little bit, and they're very cold hardy. So you might see them coming up in the fall and winter, and they're quite cold hardy. So you don't have to worry about them, except that you need that mulch layer over them to protect the growth points of the garlic cloves from freezing. But when you see daffodils in the spring, you remember that you need to feed your overwintered alliums, that's these guys, garlic and onions and shallots, and any overwintered cauliflowers, you know, the one that we were talking about that waits and waits and waits, those can benefit from a side dressing of nitrogen as well. I bet you didn't do that, Tammy, right? Because I never told you to do that.
Oh, actually I did. And because Shelley at Bay Hay has a little sign that says, plant in the fall, and then when the crocuses bloom, side dress with blood meal, and then a month later, dress with fertilizer. And so I've always
Good, that's a good one. Do that.
I've always done that.
Do that then. Yeah.
That's, I'll send you the.
Right. So,
picture.
yeah. Okay. So, so they like an early spring dressing of nitrogen. Now for garlic, actually for all the alliums, if you're using blood meal or something really concentrated like that, sprinkle it on. You can sprinkle it liberally and then scratch it into the soil surface and then put the mulch back. So you pull the leaves away, sprinkle it on, scratch it in a little tiny bit and put the leaves back. But don't put on cups and cups of it because it can make the growth so succulent that it's more prone to rust. Rust is a fungus that hits alliums, which is garlic and onions. And you can see that in the April class if you want to know about rust. So yeah, a lot of people are going to be planting garlic in October. Okay, give us the planting calendars, Carol. So here are some. Fran, maybe we should hear from you first. What's up? Hello, Fran, will you talk to us?
I just didn't catch what we're supposed to use for mulch. We're not supposed to use wood chips. What are we using?
Oh, chopped leaves are great.
Oh, I see. Okay, thanks.
Some people use straw, but around here, chopped leaves they're begging to be used.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So here are some planting calendars. Washington State University has one that's super simple. I think too simple. I'm going to skip it for now, but it's on the resource page. This might look familiar if you've been using West Side Gardeners vegetable planting calendar, but look, this is for winter. It's entirely different. So here I am, and I wonder, when do I plant Brussels sprouts? So I just hit Command F and I find Brussels sprouts, and it tells me what he does for his garden, which is in our area. Or I am thinking, is there anything I can plant? It's early September. So then I just search for the word September and I see what my options are, which I think is nice to be able to do. So I like this one. It's got some detail, but not too much detail. And then if you want to go deep and you want to know about varieties and other people's experience with this, we have the Willamette Seed Ambassadors. Now they are further south than we are. Willamette's in Oregon, right? So I might go a little bit earlier, but I think their dates, a little bit earlier than their dates, but I find their dates to work fine for me. So look at the detail on this, can look a little bit daunting, but it's really just a little story for each one. So if you want to learn about something, they might say, here are a bunch of varieties that work well, and this is what you can expect. And if they look like they're completely dead, don't freak out, they're going to come back, that kind of thing. So I think this is just a treat. And it's 7 pages long. So it's kind of like bedtime reading. Yeah, and you don't have to assign yourself the whole thing. You can just look at a couple of them. Okay. Do you have any planting calendar questions? Nope, good. Okay, so where are we going to put these things? Well, let's take a peek. Let's see where we can put them. First of all, you can do succession planting by starting them in cells while you're waiting for other things to come out. So this is September 6th, photo from my garden. I have spinach that I did manage to germinate, and cilantro, and that's bok choy. And that bok choy is it's tiny on September 6th, but it's going to feed me all winter, all the way through May. And you can also buy starts that other people have started. I would keep an eye, I would look at the planting calendars and just keep in mind that sometimes the stuff that shows up in the nurseries is a bit late, later than the planting calendars recommend. So they have already grown, of course. So if the planting calendar says put seed in the ground on August 1st, and you're buying a very well-grown start in the middle of September, that's probably fine because that thing has probably been growing for 6 weeks. But if it's way later, if you see starts for cabbage that are there in November, that thing is probably not going to it's not going to be able to grow. So we have some great nurseries around here, and I think we can rely on them and ask the staff there. But you might find them in somewhere else that isn't so great. But the county has great nurseries. Another way is to see what I can do. There we go. Is to take those starts and then interplant them. You're not waiting for something else to come out, but you're interplanting with something that's going to come out in a while. So this is an example. This is not an example from the fall, but this person has these cabbage-like plants, leaf cabbages, and they have amended the soil around it, put a little more fertilizer in, and they put these starts in. And then instead of yanking these plants out when they're fully ripe and when they want to take them out, they're cutting them off. Because if you yank them out, you may disturb the roots of the thing that you planted in between. And I would actually not cut up here for a brassica. I would cut under the soil, like stick my knife in and go under, because it's less likely to resprout that way. So a couple of examples are that you could put scallions between lettuces. Scallion sets are teeny tiny onions that you just push deeply into the ground, like 3 inches down. And then you can grow green onions, and those will start between your lettuces, and then your lettuces will come out later. I can tell you more about scallion sets if you want. And you could do your escarole around a winter squash. Like if you had a trailing winter squash or a pumpkin, it's not really using that space for roots very much. So I would definitely amend there and put my escarole in, and move a leaf over if I want it to get more sun, or maybe take a peaked looking leaf off so that I can fit those in. But do fertilize your new starts when you put them in. Make a new bed, because those frantic spring chores are not happening. And you know from your earlier growing experience that maybe it's better sun over on that other side. Of course, it's autumn sun, so you have to think, where was the sun in the spring? And that will tell you where the sun will be in the autumn, because it's equally distant from the middle of summer. So you might actually realize you wish you had a bed somewhere else. And also, winter garden food is motivating and exciting. Your tomatoes, you had September, and you're thinking, this is so great. I just want this. I'm sad this is stopping. Well, it doesn't have to stop. You can just keep going. This bed is dug directly into the lawn, and I want to remind you that you don't have to make some architectural project out of a garden bed. You can just cut the lawn into like 8 by 8 bricks, like cut straight down and chop it up, and then pick them up by their grassy hair, pull them out of the ground, and turn your spade on its side and smash the roots and soil against the side of your spade. And that'll take most of the soil out, and then compost the grass, dig in some compost, dig in some balanced fertilizer, and smooth it out, and you've got a bed you can plant. And you can get rid of this later if you want to. So this isn't autumn because I let my grass go dry. So if this were autumn, this would be brown. And also, this grass is not infiltrating, it's just flopped over because I let it go get long and I didn't edge. So no questions about that or comments? Okay. Oh, this is Sylvetta arugula that's not crowded. So this is the wintry arugula, and it's really big and happy. Also, crops will finish, lots of crops. This is not a sick pea bed. This is a done pea bed. It has just finished its life. Your spinach will bolt by then. Your spring beets might be getting pulled out. Mustards might bolt. Garlic comes out in July often. Your carrots have gotten big enough. Lots of things can be coming out, so you'll have some space. If anybody can think of anything else that comes out or any other advice about this, do let me know. So here are my tips. It's just a summary to choose the right varieties that are winter hardy. And you can actually go to a catalog and put in winter veg, and some of them will tell you, you might have to go to more than one, but some of them will recommend. Fertilize, keep it watered, especially if you're trying to get carrot and parsnip seeds up. Give them shade if they're a cool weather crop, like things that usually grow in the spring. Mulch them, but I would mulch them not when they're teeny tiny. I would wait until they're bigger. Carrie, that's another tip for bok choy, is I don't mulch until it's quite big. I don't know if I said that, but maybe I did. Lettuce and spinach, you need to trick them into germinating and protect them from freezing. And winter foods will resprout in spring. This is great if we want kale rabe, or we want those broccolis that wait until springtime to give you a broccoli head. It is not so good if you want to eat the roots. So we want to pull those. And it's usually, for me, it's early February, like really early February. But it is also great if you do want them to bolt, because we can leave some of those for the bees, as Barbara said, and for seed for the next year. So here is a garden bed. Here's my front yard, all tucked in for winter. So another thing that's, sorry, I always have a cough. Anyway, they're tucked into in various ways. So let's look at how you can protect. Some plants don't need protection. And so I would say you can protect kale, but you usually can get away without doing that. We've talked about that. Like John said, his kale lies down and then it gets back up again. I don't protect broccolis and cauliflowers that haven't yet borne any head at all. But there are different ways to protect. Sometimes it's from the rain, and a lot of times it's from cold. And sometimes I'll leave the covers off. If it's a lovely fall, I don't put the covers on for a really long time. I kind of keep an eye on the weather, and if the temperature is going to drop, then I run out there and I do all this covering. So this is a low tunnel, and I took this a couple days ago, so I'm not going to use it for very long. So I just have rocks holding it down, the plastic down. These are, sorry, drawers from a refrigerator that was unrepairable. So I took the parts out and I'm using them. This is a Rubbermaid box. It's not a new one. I'm not going to use a new one. That would be, I don't want it to go to rot in the garden, but the UV breaks the plastic down eventually. So what this is one that is split, and it's split like all the way down the side and halfway down the back. I actually found Howard Block, who owned Bay Hay, carrying this out to the garbage. And I said, Howard, can I have that? He said, it's trash. And I said, it's perfect. Give it to me. So just keep an eye out for that kind of thing. This is a 1970s bubble umbrella from which the handle fell off. So I just stabbed it into the ground. So if you just keep an eye out, if you're a trash rubbernecker, you know who you are. We've probably seen each other driving slowly by people's garbage piles. So I'm going to tell you briefly how to do this. People who've heard it before, never fear, it's not going to be as long as the first 2 times. Let's see, it's in the March class if you want more details about this. This is remesh. I like it better than PVC because it turns into iron in the soil, not plastic. So the mesh is called remesh. It's reinforcing mesh for concrete. So you can buy it at Builder's First Source and a couple of other places. I'll show you in a sec. But I and another person I know have called a home store and said, home supplies, whatever, where I'd buy this stuff, and said, I want remesh, how much is it? And they said $50. And I said, I know you're talking about cattle panel. And they didn't say, oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. They said, I know, I told you cattle panel because I figured you wanted it for your garden and you'd want cattle panel or hog panel. So no, you have to say no. And this actually happened to a friend, and she ended up buying the thing for $50. So that's not this. This, when last I checked, was $10. COVID price might have brought it up in the last couple of months, but it's $10 for a 4x8 panel. And the plastic, you can bend it. It's sturdier than fencing, but it's not as rigid as cattle panel, and it's cheaper. And I have some that are 20 years old. Also, I've covered it in plastic. The plastic can be refuse from somebody who sells mattresses or a pallet covers or something like that. They're not UV protected, but they are trash, somebody's trash, and then you can use them. And when they wear out, you can put them into your plastic recycling if they're clean. And that is a great way to go. If you are not going to do that and you're going to buy plastic, I invite you on the end of class survey, I invite you to tell me that you want a piece, and I might do a cost sharing with you if we get a roll of it. So I'll see what happens, but it'd be about $1.25 a foot, I think, for the plastic. And the reason we'd use UV protected plastic is it won't break down. It'll last for years. So you're not using more plastic and more plastic and more plastic. It has like a 4-year guarantee. They suggest that it's 4 years. It'll last for 4 years. And it might be longer here because we don't get that much incident sunlight. So yeah, you can let me know. So this information is where you can get this is on the resource page. And this is on the resource page. And you can get, this is the least expensive, but this is also the one you have to buy at 100 foot. But they have smaller sheets for sale on the market elsewhere, and it's much more expensive. So let me know if you're interested. You can also use these with deer netting, not bird netting, to protect plants from other stuff. So these are low tunnels that I made out of it. Okay, we're done with that. You can also use heavy fabric row cover. So the stuff we put over the carrots was really light. There's this AG50, they say protects to 24 degrees. You have to have support for it, like the row cover that I showed on the previous slide. And then you could put that over. It doesn't keep the water off. So for things like escarole, it won't keep them dry. But water does go through, so that could be an advantage or a disadvantage. Does anybody have any recommendation about fabric row covers? Like you've used them a lot? Nope. So this is the super heavy one. It blocks more light, but it also supposedly keeps them warmer. Okay. And mulch. So the tunnels you can use for things like maybe your green onions and what else do I have under there? Bok choy I keep under there. Escarole I keep in the tunnel that I just described. But you can also use chop leaf mulch or straw mulch for root crops. They don't need that tunnel business. You can just get some chopped leaves and throw them over. It does invite voles in. So what I do is I don't put it on until it's going to freeze. Like I'll put on my calendar, I'll look 10 days ahead and I'll just put on my calendar, Friday it's going to freeze. So put this on Thursday. And I put the chopped leaves on. And then after that big freeze is over, I might pull them back. In fact, before I put them on, I just, as insurance, I might pull out quite a few carrots and quite a few beets, and because I would like to have some of those in the fridge that are definitely not nibbled. So I put it on when it's cold, and I sort of kick it off to the side when it's not cold. Except you can just leave it on garlic, because garlic isn't attractive to voles. And I don't find parsnips attractive to voles either. Sometimes instead of leaves, people use cardboard, and that's even easier to put on and take off than the leaves, right? So definitely you could substitute that for when it's going to freeze. You can just make sure the whole thing is covered with heavy cardboard. The voles like that too. So I put it on, I harvest some, and then I put it on, and then I pull it off. And that's another reminder of what it looks like with all that protection. Most of these are unprotected because those are broccolis and cauliflowers, and they have not produced heads yet. And here's some kale that is just out in the open. I just want to remind you, you can grow under lights, and you can grow indoors. You can do sprouts that are not under lights. It's just in a dark jar in your kitchen in the winter. And basil and cilantro do great under lights if you happen to already have lights. And then I can use 4 leaves of basil instead of, needing to go down and buy for a special for a special case. And also your peppers, you can pot them up in the winter, and I've put them in my sunniest south facing window, and they get kind of leggy. But last year I got a leggy plant, but it was pretty in great shape, and it gave me 5 jalapenos in the winter. So I thought that was kind of good. Let's see what else we're doing. This is for later in the year, but pickled summer produce is a great way to eat from the winter crops as well, or from their summer crops in winter. So I think later I might be able to get us some information about fermentation. John does it and I do it. A lot of people do it, but I'd like somebody maybe to give me some more information about, like maybe I can get a conservation district pro to help us. We'll see. So there you are. See this right here? These bowls are 2 feet across at least. And that's spinach, and that's an 8-pound head of cabbage, and that's escarole, still muddy from the garden, and those are carrots, and this is January 19th. So and that's just like a normal day. That was a photo to show like grandma and grandpa what were we doing.
That is awesome.
Rust fly free carrots, it looks like.
Yes, those carrots. I think I planted them either in a pot or a raised bed because it's tricky in the ground. Yeah, yep, that's the cover. That's the Agribon cover. And yeah, let's look at another one. So you can eat a lot of stuff from the garden in winter. Today we were talking about things that were in the garden and a little bit of things that were cellared, but we'll have an upcoming class depending on interest, that is about drying and fermenting and things like that. And storing things, how to cellar stuff, which Tammy wanted to know about. So this was from a tour from earlier. Okay, so there are irrigation resource. Okay, we finished with the winter food, but I have some things that I really like you to stay for. I have resources on irrigation on the resource page. And I also want to tell you about these upcoming things that are really cool and they're really different. So this is July. We're going to have an open a water bath canning class at Barn for free, which is unusual as I understand it. And it's going to be about jams and vinegar pickles, probably strawberry jam and probably dill pickles, I think. It starts not at 7, but it starts at 5 on July 12th. And a lot of people have already received my information letter about this that includes this. If you've already received it on the survey, you can just click no. Don't click yes, whatever it is on the survey. But this is coming up, and it is space limited, and you do have to register for it. And it tells on my newsletter, it'll tell you how to register. Actually, I think it's in the resources. Is it, John, at the top? Anyway, I'll just talk about the next thing. This is another really, oh, sorry.
I have to look to check.
Oh, thanks. This is another thing that's really unusual. We have tours of Bainbridge farms given by the farmers. These are a lot of historic farms, and the farmers themselves have great histories on the island, and we can learn all sorts of cool stuff from them and connect to our community on a lovely morning. So here are the dates and where we're going. And there is a sign up. This also comes if you click, please tell me about these events on the survey. The survey asks you, do you want to know about these particular events that I'm showing you? And you get to choose that. And then it has another question, do you want to know about things in the future, other opportunities like this? And you can choose whether or not you get that. And here is the next thing. August Veg Club is a fabulous fruit tree field trip to the garden of Darren Murphy, who is the head of the fruit club for Bainbridge, the Bainbridge Backyard Fruit Club. And he is a grafter extraordinaire, and he grows tons of fruit. And you might think it's a giant garden, a giant orchard, but it's in this small suburban backyard, and it's a super popular tour. So it is not starting at 7 the way the Zoom does. And it is also not starting at 5 like the barn class. It's starting at 5:30. It's our usual day in August, but it's starting at 5:30, but that's also in the note. Let's see if I have anything else. Let's see what this last one is. Oh, yes. Will you please take the survey? John, do you have the survey link or should I?
I do not have the survey link.
Looking for it. Okay. I am going to stop my share, get the survey link and put it in the chat. Give me a sec here. I'll make it available to all of you. Okay, so I made a mistake on this once before and everyone had to say, fix the survey form. So if you could click on that and see if you get there, that would be great.
Looks good to me.
Yay, I'm so glad. Thank you. Thank you. And does anybody have any more questions or things that you want to add?
Carol, I do have a question.
Yep.
The problem I have had with my tomatoes here has been late blight.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to catch it right as it's on the stems and I'm able to pull all the plants, get rid of them,
Okay.
dump them. But I'm wondering if anyone has any experience with actually covering the plants or protecting them. Is there a way to keep them drier and keep the late blight from coming, or is it just endemic in the soil and in the air where we really can't prevent it?
Does anybody have any advice about that? I do, but
I do too, but it's probably the same as you do, Carol. So you go.
well, you can contradict me. I'm going to share my screen, I think. Let's share the screen, Carol. Okay, that's a tomato house. So you can build a thing around them. I call this my ridiculous tomato house because I've not built one before, but they're growing inside there. And you can see this, right?
Yeah, I can.
So you can build this. This is one of those low tunnels that I showed you for winter protection. And it's just up on some stakes. And then it's got plastic wrapped around it. And yeah, it's not using PVC. There's no PVC. It's all iron and bamboo, but it does have a plastic cover. It's not just endemic. It floats. Fungus spores like that float so easily that they can go 30 miles and infect one farm, and then it blooms in that farm, and then it goes 30 miles. So there are national maps that farmers can look at to show how far the cloud has gotten and when they should expect late blight in their area. It usually starts in the south because it's warmer there. And when we, yeah, so it does come for you, and it's really about cultural conditions. And so people do make tomato houses like this. You could make something more permanent if you wanted to. And another thing is if you overwinter potatoes, it can live in the living tissue. It only lives in living tissue around here over winter, supposedly. And so it can, they can give you an earlier case of it. What were you going to say, Tammy? You have a big old house, right? You have a PVC house?
Yeah, so we put a hoop house around it. But, you know, and I think that probably helps a lot. I mean, I know it helps a lot, keeps the heat in and all that. But best thing for that, the late blight, I think, is mulching around the base of the plant and not overhead watering. Because when you mulch around the plant, I think that it doesn't allow the spores to pop up out of the soil. And so it's kind of keeping that spore down. And yeah, that's the best thing I've heard of for that, is just a really nice mulch and no overhead watering, which is what's great about the tent, you know, the tent thing over it.
And maybe drip watering, or at least
Always
keeping
drip
water at soil
watering.
level.
Yeah, always drip watering, never overhead watering.
Okay.
Yeah, we,
Yes.
in
Oh,
our
sorry.
garden, we have a real strict rule about not watering the leaves, not watering from overhead.
Mm-hmm.
We had one person who would come over in the evening and water overhead, and she took out the whole garden with doing that. The blight spread within a matter of an overnight
Yeah,
experience.
it can really spread super fast.
We kick people out for overhead watering. That's the one
Wow.
cardinal sin.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Let me just do one thing here.
Thank you both. That's very helpful.
Great. And this has this is it taken apart. It's got a trellis in the middle. So this piece is not a wall, it's going down the center. And you know how to trellis, Barbara, you trellis your tomatoes, right?
Tomatoes,
You can
yeah.
trellis them up there, yeah. You can, and that helps because they're not they're not sitting on the ground and they're not all cramped together and stuff. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Lots of airflow. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I try to beat late fright by planting short season tomatoes determinate that are, you know, not that don't have a lot of growing involved, and try to beat it and try to rather than try to combat it.
Right. Just outrun it.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And determinate ones will be faster, right? There's also a list in the resource page. If you go to the April class, there is a list of tomatoes. There's a link to late blight resistant tomatoes. I don't have any experience with that. I'm growing one of them this year just as a test, but there's a list of not all the ones that exist, but the ones that were tested by Seattle Tilth Alliance. Yeah. Any last comments for the good of the order?
I think that would be a great way to share seeds with tomato seeds that are really that have success in beating the late blight here.
Yes. Yeah, and we're going to probably rely on that to come up with something. Yeah, definitely. Really great. Well, I want to say thank you to everybody for the participation. That was so cool. It's not bad that we didn't have as much in other classes because people didn't have as much to share, but that was really great. I really appreciate you speaking up and talking and sharing information that you had. I learned stuff. So thank you very much. Please do go to the feedback page, even if you have done other feedback pages for this class series. There are some new questions and things. Yeah, lots of new questions. So I'd really appreciate that. And I hope to see you at the barn canning class and the farm tours, which are ongoing through the summer, and the amazing backyard fruit. And anything else, John?
No, that's about it. The only thing I wanted to say is the Master Gardeners are doing their clinics at the library on Thursdays. They open up about 2:30, 3 o'clock. We close at 5, so they're done at 5. As we expand our hours, they'll probably stay a little bit longer. But look for them at the library on Thursdays.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your great support, and thanks for your making this a great club.
Thank you, Carol. Very
You're
helpful.
welcome. I
Thanks,
look
Carol.
forward to seeing you all. Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, goodbye.
Thank you. That was a great